Commission sent you a request for submission of the 5-year declaration of assets and personal interests. And on the 15th of July, you submitted your 5-year declaration. The Commission also asked all candidates to voluntarily complete and submit an ethics questionnaire, and you did so on the 4th of July. The Commission sent you 4 rounds of questions on 9th of August, the 21st of September, the 20th of October, and the 9th of November, respectively. You were asked a total number of 18 questions, including 39 subparts, and 15 of these questions included a request for additional documentation. According to Article 3, Paragraph 4 of the evaluation rules of the Commission, a candidate may not provide information, documents, or other materials during the hearing if the Commission requested these earlier and the candidate did not provide them within the time specified. Of course, unless the candidate provides sufficient justification, therefore. Members of the Commission will now start with asking you questions. This afternoon, Victoria Henley will start with asking questions. We will try to keep our questions short and to the point, and we ask that your answers be short and to the point as well. Victoria, I'll give you now the floor.
Thank you. Good afternoon. I'm going to begin with having to do with discipline and advisory received in 2015 for delay in decision making. I'll read you some facts and then have some questions. On January 30th, 2015, the Disciplinary Board under the Superior Council of Magistracy issued to you the disciplinary sanction warning. The Board found violation of deadlines for decision, delay in drafting decisions, and in sending decisions to parties in 36 cases. You exceeded the deadlines by 1, 2, 3, or even 4 months. You told the Disciplinary Board that the violation of deadlines was because the clerk did not draw up minutes within the time limit. In your ethics questionnaire submitted to the Commission, you also attributed your inability to draft decisions on time to a large volume of assigned cases, and also that you did not have a legal assistant. You were asked in written questions by the Commission whether you had received any complaints about delay from litigants or had experienced any other issues related to delay since the discipline in 2015. You reported that you had not received any complaints from participants regarding delay since 2015. You did advise that there were issues with the clerk sending files to the court office within 5 days when you took on cases for 2 investigative judges who resigned in 2016, and that in 2017, you'd managed 1,900 cases as an investigative judge. You directed the Commission to the Inspection Act carried out by the Judicial Inspection under the SCM, which assessed delays and workload in the Orhei Court in 2017. You noted that the situation in the Orhei Court improved and that the workload decreased after legislation increasing the number of judges and creating specialized court panels. So my first question is that on January 30th, 2015, the Disciplinary Board under the SCM found non-compliance with deadlines, delay in drafting decision, and sending decisions to parties in 36 cases and issued to you the disciplinary sanction warning. Is that correct? And some of those delays exceeded deadlines by 1, 2, 3, and even 4 months. Is that correct?
I would like to specify that the deadlines, the terms are also specified in the disciplinary decision. It starts with 9 days to 4 months. And 4 months, 3 months, it was only in 2 cases, 2 decisions, and it was hard for me to even find the reasoning for them. It was not only about the workload, but it was also other circumstances that led to that. But also it was due to the complexity of those particular cases where there were the longest delays. So it was usually a delay of 9 days, 10, 11. Even out of the decision of the disciplinary board, if you look into the details of that, you can find that information. So it was not 1 month to 4 all the time. Thank you. That was what I wanted to specify.
Thank you for the clarification. And you did attribute those delays to a clerk not drawing up minutes within the time limit, and also to handling a large volume of cases, and also not having a legal assistant. Is that correct?
Well, that is one of the reasons. One of the reasons that I told the inspection about, but they were not mentioned in that particular decision. But I could tell the Commission that since I was in my position since September 2012, well, these circumstances start with the 29th of October 2013. As you can see in the decision of the board, there are standard start the delays. You can see the period for where the delays are claimed. And in that period, when a judge is appointed to the position of judge, it is, well, the issue in the system is known. When there is a newly appointed judge, is distributed a very big amount of cases. Even as soon as a person is appointed as a judge, they get a big amount of work to do. And that is, and then add to that the lack of a legal assistant and the stockpile practically of workload, and there's very limited time, like within 24 hours the protection orders have to be reviewed, and that somehow endangers the operation of the court. And there are certain matters that have to be addressed in order to, for instance, establish what are those applications that have to be reviewed within 5 days so that they are end up on the dock. And so there are all of these things that you have to do that are on the plate of a newly appointed judge, and then it amounted to the circumstances that led to delays with regards to the decision as mentioned. And another reason is the fact that, having considered all the circumstances, the legislation was amended, and they've also increased the number of days for writing decisions up to 30 days, not 15 days as it used to be, which was not sufficient time for writing the decisions.
And since the 2015 disciplinary board decision, I just want to confirm that no parties in your cases have complained about delays in receiving decisions from you.
No, there weren't.
And when asked by the Commission about any issues with delay in decisions that might have arisen since 2015, you did advise that there were issues in the Orhei court with the clerk sending files to the court office within 5 days when you took on cases for 2 investigative judges who resigned in 2016, and that in 2017 you'd managed 1,900 cases as an investigative judge, correct?
Yes, that is correct, because the regulation provides for this transmission of the files to the Chancellery within 5 days. So I think that is very little time. It's a very time span for passing on the cases. I mean, there have to be the minutes drafted, and there are the register that has to be filled, and some other actions have to be undertaken by the clerk. So it's little time for that. And for such a big workload.
And also in your responses to questions from the Commission, you also directed the Commission to the Inspection Act that was carried out by the Judicial Inspection under the SCM, which assessed delays in workload in the Orhei Court in 2017. And I think we've given you a copy of that act. And if I have it correct, the inspection report noted that for 9 months in 2017, the caseload in Orhei was 828 cases compared to a system average of 528 cases, and that the total cases closed per judge was 540 compared to a system average of 376. That act named 4 judges for delays that violated the time limits and submitted cases, and you were cited in the report for 2 cases of delay. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct. And the statistics that we referred to, they are, that is summed up, and that is divided by the number of judges that worked there at that moment in time, though. But I personally, as I said, I had 1,900 cases. So that number of cases was divided by the number of other judges too. So that is the average, 882 per judge in our court. But it was critical, indeed a critical time for our court. The workload was huge.
And according to the statistical data in the Act, it was reported that you examined 2,082 cases in the first 11 months of 2017, and you closed 10 cases per day on average. Isn't that correct?
Da, foarte corect.
Okay.
Yes, that is correct.
And could you describe for the Commission any measures you've undertaken to ensure that your decisions are delivered within the deadlines?
După o sancțiune disciplinară,
After the disciplinary sanction with a warning, obviously you no longer want to have any other sanctions in the future. So therefore, in that period of time, I would work until 9, 10 p.m. and sometimes I would show up at work at 5 a.m. to make sure no deadlines were violated, and sometimes I would have to take work at home. I don't want to complain, but sometimes I would only sleep 4 or 5 hours
efectuat în afara orilor
only at night, and there was a lot of work that I was doing beyond the program hours, the work program.
Is there anything you'd like to add or further clarify with respect to this issue?
Eu am menționat pe parcursul
No, I guess by answering the questions, I added what I wanted to add, but the issue is the system-wide issue, and it's there, and it has to do with a huge workload for judges. No judge is willing to violate any of the deadlines or to take too long or to have delays in their work and not follow the legal provisions thus.
Thank you. And the next issue I'm going to go into has to do with the use of an apartment between 2004 and I think 2020. We'll clarify that. From 2004 to 2020, you and your children lived in a 47.7 square meter apartment in Chisinau. The apartment was owned by a minor child who inherited the house at the age of 6 after the death of his mother. The minor's guardian offered to allow you and your children to live in the apartment until the minor turned 18. You told the Commission that you had a verbal understanding with the guardian and your only obligation was to look after the apartment and pay the utilities. You presented a statement from the guardian which confirms that she had a verbal understanding with you and allowed you to live in the apartment on the condition of paying the utilities, and that she didn't ask you for rent or other payments. You were asked in written questions from the Commission what was your relationship with the minor and the guardian and whether you were related to them. You stated that you have no family relationship, but you did not explain what your relationship was with them. In November 2018, one of your children and your child's spouse purchased the apartment from the owner, who was then 20 years old, for the price of 252,191 lei. They sold the apartment in November 2020 for the price of 680,522 lei. Now I'm going to ask you some questions, and I am not using names. I am going to refer to the minor as the minor and the guardian as the guardian. I think if you could do the same. Beginning in 2004, you and your children lived in an apartment in Chisinau, correct?
Da, corect.
Yes.
And you lived there until 2020?
Corect. Dar și în
Yes,
răspuns
but in my answers too, I mentioned that in that period of time, we were commuting and we were staying at my parents' as well. I was appointed as judge in 2012, and thus
mai lungă sau mai mare.
for a longer time throughout the week when I was working there, I would live at my parents' place, who lived closer to the court where I worked, and my children remained to live in the apartment.
Adică pe parcursul, da,
So for this period of time, since 2012, I would come to Chisinau to see my children in that apartment, who stayed in that apartment.
And please confirm that you and or your children lived in the apartment paying only utilities from 2004 until 2020.
da, foarte corect.
Yes, that is correct.
And you had a verbal agreement with the guardian of the minor who owned the apartment that you could live in the apartment with your children without paying rent and only paying utilities until the minor turned 18, correct?
Da.
Okay.
Yes.
And you were not related to the minor who owned the apartment or his guardian. Is that correct?
No. Yes, I'm not relative.
Okay. And before you moved into the apartment, how did you know the minor's guardian?
Eu n-am cunoscut familie respectivă.
I did not know that family, but my father knew the grandfather of the minor.
Orhei.
They worked in Orhei. The grandfather worked in Orhei. So I only called the phone number. I called the guardian by phone. That is the grandfather. I never saw the minor. I only talked to the grandmother of the minor. So the transaction was agreed on with her. We were not relatives of any kind, just an acquaintance. Because we were looking for an apartment so that I wouldn't have to commute every day from village to Chisinau, because my children went to school in Chisinau. So that was the solution, that we found that particular apartment.
And how did you find out about the apartment?
De la tatăl meu.
From my father.
From your father. All right. And so somehow the grandfather mentioned that this apartment was available, and that's how you learned of it?
Bine, eu o să vă dau acum detalii ce
Well,
țin
I
de
can
apartament.
provide more details about this apartment. So,
Pentru părinți,
for the parents, there were parents who had only one daughter. She passed away at 20 years old, and she had that minor child. So it was a tragedy for that family.
dacă este cazul,
I'm not certain if I have to say this publicly, but the death happened because of an overdose with narcotic substances. And for the family, that was a dramatic situation. The only child, that is, the only daughter. So maybe that's why maybe the attitude of her parents to me was were corresponding to the circumstances I was in. So that's why the contract or that agreement came from, on the basis of the attitude of the parents of that
adică au fost
young woman. So it was some sort of I don't know how to put it in words.
And were both the guardian and her husband employed at the time?
da, loc de muncă și
Yes, they were employed, and they had another apartment in the center of Chisinau
locuiau ei.
where they were living.
Plus, condiția a fost
And there was the condition that I would pay for utilities, so that they didn't have to, so that the minor didn't have to cover any expenses whatsoever. The apartment was at the 5th floor, and the roof was quite problematic because nobody took care of that apartment. So there was some risk that there would be some flooding and because of leakages, and that would be harmful for the neighbors as well. And my brother helped me with renovating the roof. So I was supposed to take care of the apartment until the minor turned 18, because his grandparents didn't want to sell it, because they didn't want to be berated then by the minors. And why did you sell the apartment without my agreement? And that was their reason. So they decided to keep the apartment until the minor turned 18, so that he would be the one, the child would be the one, the minor then would be the one to decide what to do with that apartment.
And were the guardian and her husband under any kind of financial pressure or anything at the time that they came up with the arrangement with you to live in the apartment?
ei nu aveau probleme
They did not have any financial issues. It's only that somebody had to pay for the services, for utilities. I guess they wanted to get rid of having to cover any expenses. The grandfather worked in the tobacco plant factory in Orhei, so I think they had enough funds to support their livelihood, their life.
But you and your children lived in the apartment for 16 years without paying rent. And if you had been charged and paid rent, that money would have benefited the minor child, correct?
Dacă era să ne învoce astfel de
Well,
cerințe,
if they had that requirement, we would have negotiated and we would have talked about it. If we agreed on the amount and if it was affordable for me, we would have accepted it.
Did you ever have any concerns ethically or otherwise about the fairness of the situation?
un pic n-am înțeles întrebarea.
I'm not sure I understood the question.
Eu dacă am avut ceva
Whether I had any doubts about it.
Right. You were living in an apartment without paying rent. The owner of the apartment was a minor who, had there been rent charged, would have benefited the minor.
Clar, am înțeles. Păi copilul era cu tutorii care
Well, the child had a guardian, and the guardian was responsible for the minor, and the child is under the minor is under the protection of the guardian. And we negotiated with the guardian, and the guardian didn't ask for rent, didn't say it was necessary to pay rent. They had no intention whatsoever to rent the apartment out. However, since they knew about my particular situation, they accepted to rent it to me as long as I paid for utilities.
And one of your children and your child's spouse purchased the apartment in 2018 for 252,191 lei. Is that correct?
Corect. După ce am plinit
That is correct. When the child turned 18, the guardian told me that the minor didn't want to live in that apartment, and that they had the intention to sell it. So they asked me if I was willing to buy it, and I said that I personally do not have the funds to buy this apartment. However, my children, they had their relationship and they got married, and I said that if it was possible, and if my children still wanted to live there in that apartment, as in I told them if they ever had the intention to buy it, then the owners would negotiate with the children. So my first daughter got married, talked to the husband. They refused to buy it. They said they didn't want to buy it because the husband used to live in a private house and would never move into an apartment. And later, the second daughter and her husband decided to buy it, and they did.
But this is an old apartment that was sold at the price that was mentioned.
Okay. And were you still living in the apartment when your child and your child's spouse purchased it?
Eu vineam sporadic, după cum v-am relatat.
I was coming once in a while. I was living with my parents, but I was coming for the weekends because I had to visit my children and so on.
And the owner of the apartment was no longer a minor when the apartment was sold, correct?
Nu.
No, not a minor anymore.
And if you were you involved in any way in the sale of the property from the minor to your daughter?
Nu am fost implicată.
No, I haven't been involved. The only thing that I also told my children and their spouses that every transaction has to be official and true to the amount that was negotiated. So it has to be reflected truthfully in the contract.
Okay. And do you have any understanding or any idea of how the purchase price was arrived at?
Asta a negociat
That was a negotiation between the grandchild of a guardian with my daughter and her spouse.
Did anyone else represent the minor? The minor was representing himself.
minorul cu bunica, cu tutorele.
It was his minor with the grandmother, and I was with my daughter and her spouse.
So you did assist your daughter and her spouse in buying in negotiating for the apartment.
Nu m-am justat, am fost prezentă.
I did not assist her. I attended. I was present there.
And what was the circumstance, what was the minor's situation when the apartment was sold? He was at that point 20 years old, 18 years old?
Vreo 20 undeva, cred.
Around 20, I think.
Okay.
După
And
18 ani era.
It was over 18.
And was the minor under any financial or other pressure to sell the apartment at that time?
Eu nu vă pot spune.
I don't know about any such circumstances,
Dar consider că nu avea
but I believe he was not under pressure, because should he, well, if he was under pressure, he would have sold it immediately after reaching the age of 18. But again, I told you, it was negotiated later on when my children were ready or available to buy it. Because if my second daughter refused to buy it as well, then the only thing we could do was to empty it and to let them sell it to another person. But the price was quite accessible, and that's why it was purchased.
And the apartment was sold in November of 2020 for 680,522 lei, correct?
Da, corect.
Okay.
True.
Any idea why the apartment sold for more than twice what your child and your child's spouse had paid for it 2 years earlier?
Da, fiindcă în apartament.
Yes, because capital repairs were made, the flooring was changed, the door, walls were plastered, the heaters were changed, so capital repairs. And after these repairs, it was sold, evaluated by real estate agents, and the price was also truthfully reflected in the sales contract.
And other than being present during the negotiations between the minor and his grandmother on the one hand and your child and child spouse and you on the other hand, you didn't have any other involvement in the sale of the property to your daughter?
No.
Is there anything you'd like to add or further clarify with respect to this issue?
No.
All right.
Doamna Buzu, bună ziua.
Bună ziua.
Hello, Madam Buzu. A question with respect to this, please. Since 2004 to 2018, your children mostly, and you sometimes, were living in this apartment. Yes, that is true. In 2018, it was sold and purchased by a member of your family. I wonder, when the buyer or the seller, well, when did the seller want to sell this apartment? Obviously, the transfer happened in 2018. But when the intent happened, I mean, of any of the parties involved to sell by, as I said, after the child reached the age of 18, the child was supposed to decide, and that's when the intent happened. I mean, there was a discussion. The child discussed that the apartment has to be sold. From what I understood, he sold it and bought a car. But, well, speaking chronologically, the transfer of property to your daughter happened in 2018. So the decision was taken in 2018? No, previously. That's what I'm asking. So when did it happen? 2017, 2016, or before? Well, to look at the age of the child, it was probably 2 years before the transaction. Because the intent, and we were informed of this intention, and the only thing I asked, is it urgent for them to sell the apartment? And we were told that it was not urgent. To some extent, they were ready to wait for for the availability to buy it, and I told him that I told them that I was not going to buy the apartment. Hello, Madam Buzu. At the time of alienating the apartment, did this minor have another living space? Did he have a place to live? Yes, he was living with his grandparents in a 3-room apartment in the center of Chisinau, just behind some hotel.
Avea apartament cu trei
He had a three-room apartment. The grandparents had a three-room apartment. He was living with them. So it was only grandparents. It was
bunii au avut unica fiică
grandparents, and they had one daughter and one grandchild. So he was the only
I
one.
have also one additional question. When the negotiations took place between your daughter and also with you present and the grandmother and the son or the grandson, was there a real estate agent involved, someone who could make an evaluation about the value of the property at that time, or any sort of advice that the parties could take at that time?
agentul mobiliar n-a fost.
There was no real estate agent because it was a direct negotiation,
Printr-o agenție
and we did not go through a real estate agent. But when the apartment was sold by the daughter, that was done through a real estate agent and with the appropriate evaluation, expert evaluation of the apartment.
Nana?
In your statements, you mentioned that your daughters lived alone in the apartment and you were visiting time after time. I just want to double check. In 2004, one of your child was 11 years old, another 15 years old, if I'm not mistaken. So is it your statement that the children were living alone that time in the apartment?
Eu am relatat că în
I said that in
2012,
2012, after I was appointed as a judge
Secretariat Orhei,
to Orhei Court,
părinții mei locuiesc la
my parents live 15 kilometers away from the court.
circulam de la
At
ei.
that time, I was traveling from my parents, not since 2004, I left them alone, since 2012.
Un copil avea
One of the child was 19, and the second was plus 5, that would be 24.
adică erau majori.
So they were of age at that point already.
But you had this apartment from 2004 till 2018. So what happened between 2004 and 2012 then? So
Acolo locuiam.
I was living there with my daughters.
okay.
You want to have a question?
Eu doar, scuze, fără date personale.
Sorry,
pentru că să
without
înțelegem,
personal data, we just want to
bunii au fost
understand.
numiți,
The grandparents
tutorii minorilor,
were appointed to
că
be
tatăl
the
nu
minor's
era,
guardian, but the
a fost
father
vreo dispută
was
acolo,
out of the picture. Was there a
sau
dispute,
tatăl n-a
or
participat deloc
I
al
mean,
minorilor la nicio
the minor's father was never part of a discussion about the apartment, or there was no father?
Da.
După cum am
Child's father.
înțeles,
As from what I
mama era
understood,
solidară,
it
că nu
was
era în căsătorie.
it was a single mom. She was not married, and there was no registered father of a child.
No more questions? Victoria, you want to go on?
Next, I have a question about some bank accounts, and I believe we've given you a list that provides detail about the bank accounts. So during the period 2012 to 2016, you had 4 bank accounts at the same bank, and I think we've given you a list of those accounts with more detail to allow you to identify them. Between 2012 and 2015, in your annual NIA statements, NIA declarations, you declared only one account at the bank where you had the 4 bank accounts without a bank account number. And in 2016, you declared only the bank accounts that are listed as account number 1 and account number 4. When asked by the Commission in written questions about your failure to disclose all accounts with the bank between 2012 and 2015, you stated that you declared the bank accounts without specifying the account number, only the bank. Please confirm that you held the 4 bank accounts listed as M-Bank accounts 1 through 4 between 2012 and 2016.
Da, le-am deținut.
Yes, I had those accounts.
Okay. And according to the Article 4, Paragraph 1, Letter D of Law Number 1264/2002, which was in force until August 1st, 2016, the subject of the NIA declaration had the obligation to declare all financial assets, including bank accounts. And you declared only one bank account without an account number between 2012 and 2016. Is that correct?
Da, corect.
Yes, it is.
And which bank account were you referring to in the NIA declaration?
Contul care este deschis în
The-
euro a fost
The account in euros
declarat.
was declared.
Okay. And we have that listed as account number 1.
Da, foarte corect.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Could you explain why you didn't declare the other 3 bank accounts? So in other words, accounts 2, 3, and 4?
Eu am mai trecut încă o dată prin
I
declarațiile
looked
mele
once
ca să
more
înțeleg
through
de
my
ce au
declarations to
omis,
understand why
a fi declarate.
I
Am la
omitted
rubrica
disclosing
din,
them.
anexa
In
legii
that
1264
part of
din
annex
17
to the law
2002,
1264
am anexat
of
declarațiile.
2002, the annex, that is the declaration.
De ce am ajuns eu la ce
And
am,
why
să spun,
did
decizie
I
de a menționa
reach
așa,
that
deoarece
decision
în
to list as I
capitolul
did?
4
Because
a
Chapter 4,
declarației,
or Section 4
active
of the declaration, financial assets,
este rubrica 1 unde este
has
menționat contul
subsection
bancare,
1 that
unde
speaks of
urma să
bank
indic
accounts, where I
numărul
had
conturilor
to
respective care nu au fost menționate.
mention these
Primul
accounts that
cont, nici
were
n-am
not mentioned.
cunoscut existența acestor,
Well,
să
about
explic.
one account, I did not even know that it existed. I will explain you the details later
Unde
on.
este la rubrica dată,
And where we have the name of the institution that is managing the account and the address, the type, the amount in currency, year of opening, dividends, and holder. I did not mention that because the other accounts were listed in Section 6 of the declaration under debts.
Unde este menționat creditorul, ceea ce am fost
So,
eu
which lists the creditor, and I was the creditor, the contract of what year, the due date, the interest rate, and so on. Everything that is listed in that section. But because when you get a credit, a bank account is opened at the same time.
Din acest considerent,
For this
am considerat că
reason,
nu este necesar să
I
fie dublată
believed it
că
was
informația
necessary to
și la
duplicate the
conturi
information,
bancare
to list it both
menționate
under bank
și la
accounts
rubrica datorii.
and
A fost o emisiune
under debts.
involuntară
That
sau
was an involuntary omission.
neclară pentru
Maybe it
întocmirea
was
declarației.
unclear for me when filling out the declaration.
Is there anything else you'd like to add or further clarify with respect to this issue?
Da, vreau să
Yes,
adaug,
I would like to
ce
add
ține de contul nedeclarat
about undeclared
din
account
2010,
of 2010
care se finisează cu
that
173.
with 173.
Este menționată în informația dumneavoastră contul
In
numărul 3.
that's account number 3 in your information.
Eu, după cum am primit explicații și de la
When
bancă
I
și
received
am
explanations
relatat
from
și
the
în,
bank, and I
răspunsurile care
said
urma
that in
să
the
le relatez în 3 zile, că nu
answers
cunosc nici
where I had to
considerente.
answer in 3
Este
days.
diferență acolo între
When I said
sume.
that I don't know why there is a
Ulterior,
difference in
deja
the
m-am
amounts,
consultat
I
cu
consulted
specialistul de la bancă și mi-a
the
relatat
bank
că la
officer, and I
deschiderea
was
unui
told that
credit,
when a
creditul
credit
care a
is
fost
issued,
primul credit al meu deschis
that was my
flexibil,
first flexible credit
în
that
sumă
was
de
opened
30.000 de lei,
in the amount of 30,000 lei.
paralel se
In
deschide și
parallel,
contul respectiv menționat,
this
173.
mentioned
Este
account,
un cont,
173, was
de
opened.
garanție
This is
sau
sort of a
un
guarantee
cont
account, or
al băncii.
it is a bank's account. According to their bank policy, it is opened
Contului bancar
automatically,
de credit.
added to the bank credit.
Că este una și aceeași,
So this is one and the same.
unul și același
It's one and the same action of the bank with respect to this opened credit, issued credit. They said that if the creditor does not have enough financial resources to pay, meaning it's unable to pay, the bank has this account as a guarantee, a sort of insurance for the bank. This is the explanation that I got.
I have a couple of further
Am
questions.
câteva întrebări de desfășurare
bank
cumva
accounts.
despre conturile bancare.
In 2011 and 2012, you deposited a total of, it appears, 110,601 lei to bank account number 2. And when asked in written questions by the Commission, you stated that the account, again, was a flexible credit account with a limit of 30,000 lei, which you used when necessary and was replenished with funds from your salary. The transactions in bank account number 2 do not appear to correspond with a flexible credit card in that no payments are registered on that credit card account. And in 2011, it appears, and I believe we've given you copies of the bank records, 55,216 lei were deposited to this account. And in 2012, another 56,740 lei were deposited to this account. Your salary in 2011 was 72,000 roughly, and in 2011 was roughly 72,000, and your salary in 2012 was roughly 60,000. So it appeared that close to 90% of your salary was being deposited to those accounts.
I will explain the circumstances of that card. That was a card with a 30,000 lei amount on it. Whenever needed, I had the possibility to withdraw an amount of up to 30,000, but I didn't show you the contract to the bank because the bank told me that they don't have that contract anymore because it's past its storage deadline. But the contract, a condition of that contract is that if within 2 months, so let's say you withdraw 1,000 lei, and if you put them back within 2 months, back on the card, no interest is applied on that 1,000 lei amount. If you passed over 2 months, interest was applied. So if I was taking some money from this card, I was getting the salary and putting them back in order not to cross this 2 months period, because if I went over it, interest was applied. So this was a flexible card. And of course, I was getting salary at the beginning of the month. If I had some more needs, I was taking money from the card, and at the next salary, I was compensating the amount that I was withdrawing from the card.
But I believe it doesn't appear as if you were doing withdrawals from the account.
You said that there were withdrawals and the amount of 55,000.
No, the amount, it appeared that in 2011, 55,000 were deposited to the account. And in 2012, 56,000 lei were deposited to the account.
That's not true, because you could not put money onto this account. These were amounts that you could take and then compensate in the amount of up to 30,000 lei. I was not depositing money on that card. This was a credit card.
Okay, and I think, again, according to your answers to written questions, bank account number 3 was connected to bank account number 2. And I was just asking you questions about bank account number 2. However, the transactions on those 2 accounts do not appear to correspond. In 2011 and 2012, bank records indicated you deposited 79,000 lei in cash to that account. And I believe in answers you told the commission you don't know why the amounts do not correspond between bank account number 2 and bank account number 3. So just to clarify, if I understand, bank account number 2, you indicate was a flexible credit card account with a limit of 30,000 lei, which you use when necessary and replenish with funds from your salary, correct?
Correct.
Correct.
And the deposits in 2011 totaling 55,000 and 56,000, is it your position that you did not make deposits of 55,000 in 2011 and 56,000 in 2012?
Dacă a fost sustrasă suma respectivă,
If that was a withdrawal, well, since I was withdrawing this amount, of course I was putting money back. I don't know if the commission has information about withdrawals from this account. I explained to you what kind of card that was.
nu era un card care
It wasn't a card for deposits. It was a credit card.
Okay. So if I understand it, your position is that if there were 55,000 in deposits, there would have been roughly 55,000 in withdrawals that was being reimbursed? Okay, and same for the 56,000 in 2012, correct?
Da, corect.
Yes, correct.
All right. And then there appears to be a discrepancy. Well, the amounts deposited in bank accounts 2 and 3 in 2011 and 2012 total almost 190,000 lei, which would exceed your total salary for those years. Can you explain that?
Iarăși undeva reiterez că
Again, I would like to reiterate that these two accounts
creditul
are
flexibil
the
30.000 de lei.
flexible credit of
De ce sunt pe
30,000.
ambele conturi
Why
sumele
it
date,
shows these amounts on both accounts, I said I can't explain.
dar ele
but
în contul numărul 2
In account
sunt
number 2,
aceeași sumă
it's
care
the
sunt
same
și în contul
amount
numărul 3.
as in account
Dar
number
contul
3.
numărul 3
But
este
account number
contul
3
băncii,
is
care
the
este
bank's
ca,
account, that is
asigurarea
like
băncii.
the bank's
Eu
insurance.
am relatat că nu cunosc
I
de
said
ce
that I
este
don't
suma
know
diferența
why
acolo,
there
nu
is a
prea mare
difference
este.
in the
Eu
amount, not very big,
intuiesc
but
că
there is.
posibil
So
pe
I
contul de garanție,
can only presume that
care
on
este
that
relatată
guarantee account
dobânda, care
also
deja a
reflects
expirat
the
la depunerea anunțării
interest that could have happened if I failed to reimburse it in the due time.
în anexe care se
There's
menționează.
also a certificate that I did not see in the annex, but it speaks of this credit card. It says that it has two accounts. The credit card has two accounts. A credit account with number
Contul, iarăși, de credit,
and
iarăși
another
același număr care
credit
se referă la același card.
and with a number, but they are both belonging to the same card. I don't know how to explain the bank's policy. Maybe a professional has to explain the details.
Da, banca își deschidea două
This is how the bank was doing. They were opening two bank accounts under one credit card, but the amount is the same. It is overlapping.
Right, except one set of records indicates that the total amount deposited in one account was roughly 110,000, and then another in excess of 70,000 or 76,000 in the other. So the transactions, at least from the records we have from the bank, don't correspond.
Eu chiar nu pot să explic.
I really
Dacă
can't
faci
explain because
diferența, este
if
undeva diferența de
you tried to calculate the difference. There is almost 30,000 lei difference. And maybe on an account, it was also the bank's amount of a credit, like the 30,000 plus what I was repaying. I don't know. I got this idea right now. That's why the amount on the other account, the amount was bigger, like adding the 30,000 lei of the bank. But on the insurance account, that was the amount that was managed, reimbursed to the bank. But well, that's my opinion, but a professional could give a true, a correct answer. I was just making now calculations as you were presenting.
Okay. Is there anything else you'd like to add or further clarify with respect to this issue? Okay.
No.
Anyone else?
I have no further
Want to ask
questions.
a question? If not, then I would like to give you the opportunity to make a closing comment to the Commission, and after that we will close the hearing. So please go ahead if you would like to make a closing comment to the Commission now.
I would like to mention that any practice accumulated over the time span of my work, even the mistakes here and there, that is a lesson learned for me. And there's issues that we looked into throughout the Q&A rounds, and by doing that, I think that also has a role to make the person more careful and attentive in their work. It does carry a disciplinary nature to it, and it also maybe might lead to improving the attitude of one in carrying out different transactions. That would be a lesson learned for the future when engaging in any transaction whatsoever. As for the position that I decided to be a candidate for, I decided to apply for this position because I believe that in my professional life, I've gained a lot of experience, also out of the trainings related to the administration of courts, trainings at international level as well. And I think I'm capable of taking into account of considering decisions on the basis of the practice and experience I've acquired so far if I pass this evaluation. I would like to thank the Commission for the questions that were asked. Thank you for your understanding. If there was an understanding that the Commission gained, and I hope I was clear in my answers to the questions that were asked. Thank you, and I wish the best of luck to the candidates to the position of member in the Superior Council of Magistracy, and the best of luck to the Commission in its work. Thank you.
Thank you, and also a big thank you for being here this afternoon and answering the questions from the Commission. With this, we come to the end of the hearing, and the Commission will now withdraw for deliberations. And as much as possible, the Commission will try to deliver a decision in relation to your evaluation within a month from the date of this hearing. So again, a big thank you, and the hearing is hereby closed.
Thank you.